Welcome to the Narrate podcast, where we aim to tell God's story with our lives. We'll be continuing to post the Sunday message each week, but we want to dive a little deeper and offer some content to supplement your life with God, and that's where our Beyond Sunday series comes in. Join Adam and Narrate staff as they provide thoughtful discussions, ideas, and interviews that go beyond the message you'll hear on Sunday.
So I wanted to just talk about the lectionary because we've talked about it, and yet I think we've at times confused people more than we've helped them because it is very confusing.
Yeah, it is.
So this is Leslie and I just kind of wanted having this conversation, and part of the reason I wanted to have it with her is I don't use it daily. I use it for the Psalms. You do use it daily. Is that correct?
Yep.
What does that look like for you?
It's just part of my morning routine. So in my morning quiet time, I use the Book of Common Prayer, just morning service. And this is the confusing part, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but the scheduled readings in the back of the Book of Common Prayer versus the daily office lectionary were always different.
Okay, yeah.
So anyways, part of my morning routine now is mostly through the app, the Daily Office app, which are the Daily Office lectionary.
And it's just called that, right?
Yep, Daily Office. I think and it's just like the picture of the
Jerusalem cross.
Yeah, kind of picture, and those readings, they just give them to you in the morning. So it's just a series of scripture and prayer, and that's just part of my morning. I don't do the midday or the evening one usually.
Okay.
Just the morning.
And within the app, you can click just the scriptural readings or the accompanying prayers.
Yep.
Which do you do?
I do all of it, but because there's also, I'm getting very techie with this now, but there's a Daily Office app, podcast by this guy named Russell Hill. And he's very he calls it the no frills, no fuss Daily Office.
Oh, yeah, I've listened to this.
Yeah, and so he just goes through the exact service. And I found, actually Jerry Stordahl is the one that told me about that. And I love it because when I used to just read in the morning, it lays out what the leader would say and what you would say as the congregant. But when you're by yourself, it's not. Uh-huh. So when you're listening to this guy read it, then you can read with him at the parts that you read. It just makes me feel more.
So you have the app open and earbuds in, and then do you say it out loud?
I do. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you find there's a difference when you do?
I do. I think there's something powerful about spoken word and saying something out loud. Plus, I'm alone, so I don't have to feel weird.
There's a couple other people in there, I won't name names, that I know do that, and I've heard that same thing of just the vocalization of it. I also have a friend he's the one that introduced me to just the idea of starting my time with a psalm, and even he was like, I dare you say it out loud and see how much of a difference it makes. So
it really does help with the feeling like you're praying the psalm if you say it out loud. I think. Yeah, versus just reading it. Plus, some of those are so well known. I mean, if you spend time in the Psalms, it's kind of okay, this one again. But if you say it out loud, it's sometimes different words will stick out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So part of what brought this to mind, inspired me into this, was the reading for March 23rd is super hard. For that Sunday, because it's when Jesus talks about if you don't repent, you too will perish. It's those people who died at the Tower of Siloam or whatever. And that got me thinking personally about how did I arrive at the lectionary? And it goes back to COVID, when in May of 2021, we just started into studying Matthew, having for years done topic-based series. And having done topic-based series for the first year after Narrate, that's good for me to remember. We tell this story that Narrate changed right after COVID, but it really stayed the same for 14 months. But in that time, what was happening to me was the process that I'd spent the last, I guess it was 10 years, which was finding a good book and then turning that into a Bible study or topically searching out the scripture. Personally, it didn't work anymore. Sure. And Fred taught me years ago to study the Bible, and his way was, he's a gospel guy and a New Testament guy. So for years what I did was, he's read Matthew, then read Acts, then read Mark, the second gospel, and then read Romans and 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and then read Mark. And so you just basically create these 4 chunks. So I went back into Matthew anticipating doing that, and 18 months later was done with Matthew, which became a series for Matthew. And then when we learned of the lectionary, I was like, wait a minute, this is kind of the same thing. So basically about half the time right now we're following the lectionary. And this next week is an example of that to me. Like I would have totally skipped that. And yet like trusting that I'm brought to just attend to that in this season, it's actually been a really challenging, helpful study for me, which got me just thinking, I just want to bring the lectionary up. But before we get into any more of it, and I think we're of the same mind here, where if you have a Bible and prayer routine that's personal to you and it's not the lectionary, then like move on to the next podcast. Like I don't think any of us have this desire to hard sell the lectionary. It's just my growing line in my head is it's a tool, not a rule. Like it's just so that's where I'm fascinated by your story, because you have a long history with the Bible, and yet you have found rhythm and routine in the lectionary.
Well, I think part of it is that, like, kind of what you were saying about when you sit down to pick something to read, I don't know, I just found myself, I wasn't branching out into anything that, I was like, oh, these are the familiar things I would read. And when I follow the lectionary, I don't have to, I just read it. And then it's like, what's God going to tell me in this today? Maybe it's something cool. Maybe it's nothing, I like that it's like connected to something, like people all over the world are reading the same thing. It's kind of like when we got into the world of streaming TV, like Netflix and stuff. When I'm home alone, I don't like streaming TV because it's like, I finally have put my finger on it. It's like you're in this like bubble. And like what I'm watching, I'm the only person watching it. But like if you watch like regular TV with commercials, which who does that now? But
sure.
we have some like rare commercial type channels. And I like putting those on because it's like, okay, I'm connected to people in the world.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Like it's like a silly comparison, but it kind of is the same thing. Like I'm reading the same thing other people are reading. We're kind of all going to interpret it different, get something different out of it. But I'm not just in this like Christian bubble by myself.
When did you jump in? Like when did you start using it?
Probably like right around the same time I took the job.
Okay. Huh. Just for want of what? Can you identify what drove it then?
Probably just more like depth to my routine, because my routine always had Bible involved and prayer involved, but I was sort of feeling like it was the same CD like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it was like I didn't know about the lectionary or the Book of Common Prayer or any of that, and so when I found that as a tool, I was like, well, I'll try it, and it felt really good. It felt like I don't have to think about what to read. It's just what can I get from the reading, what's going to stick out, what's going to be cool that day.
I wonder if as an artist, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so bat them back, but I wonder if there's an appreciation for you of, like artists have a sense of, I might sit down to paint and at the end of 2 hours have done nothing worthwhile, or I might sit down to write a song and have nothing to show for it when I'm done. Does that, listening to you, that comes to mind of like, I just wonder if you have a better imagination for what it looks like to show up to the text, because you alluded to that. Like sometimes it's awesome and sometimes it's like, well.
Yeah, there are a lot of days where it's just, I didn't glean anything that I felt was really worthwhile out of that. But it's just something about coming back and doing it every morning.
Yeah.
Makes me feel centered and grounded, and, like God shows up in my life, in sometimes not profound ways.
Yeah.
But he's always just there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard artists talk about like 80% of what you create is garbage, but you don't get the 20 without the 80.
Right, exactly,
That Chase was telling me last night that Stephen King writes, I think it was 1,500 words every day.
Wow.
And then the next day, he edits those 1,500 words, keeps what he determines to keep, and then writes another 1,500 and publishes a book every 3 months.
Wow.
Is what he was saying. So it's that kind of, and that's the way I've always thought about quiet times, whether you show up and read it the way Fred taught me or use a lectionary of just, you can't always be looking for this massive experience.
The wow factor, the miracle, totally.
Yeah, so again, like I just want to reiterate, this is not born of an Anglican agenda. It's born of, I've spent 25 years of my life trying to teach people how to access the Bible for themselves. And I don't expect that this brings any higher results than what I was trying, but I do think that part of what's intimidating is what you've described, is just like, where do I start? Mm-hmm. And among the many other tools, this is a way to start. But then, because of the way we work together on Sundays, we've had this like comedy act for the last 9 months of like, which one is it, and where do we get it, and how do we actually figure out what psalm we're reading?
Well, because there were a couple Sundays where we would like watch a church's service for something we were planning, and their scriptures were different than the ones we were using, and it was just so confusing.
Super confusing.
And I had bought what I thought was a lectionary on Amazon for myself, and the readings were different. And it was just like all these little series of things that we were just very confused. Yeah,
I had someone come up to me at church a few weeks ago, and I was like, hey, I bought this lectionary, but it's different than the one that you gave us. And so that's definitely a theme. So I don't remember, feel like it was almost a breaking point last week. I reached out to my friend Ben at Trinity, who kind of manages, he's the classic tech person who seems like he manages a lot of things. And he, to his credit, jumped on the phone and called and kind of simplified a couple things. So in the world of lectionaries, there's actually 2 different lectionaries. Well, actually, I think even then I should go back from there. He explained that the church, it was really the English Reformation that gave rise to what we would call a lectionary, because that was part of what that Reformation was about, was getting the text back in the hands of people.
Sure.
And even in the hands of clergy. Like, we forget that even the clergy weren't particularly biblically literate or at all. So Cranmer in particular, like, he was the one that put this together. And the way Ben said it is, how do you say, like, the Church of England has been doing lectionaries forever, which he recognized the irony of. But then he went on to explain, but today then, the Roman Catholics have a version, and the Presbyterians have a version, and there's a version that I think is the one we were using the most, which is called the Revised Common Lectionary.
Right.
So in the world of lectionaries, there's lots of them, and I hope people hear this from us so much they get sick of hearing it. Like, it's not important to us that the 2019 ACNA lectionary is the superior one. It's just a point of reference. Like, and I think this is where it's been helpful this week of like, okay, so now we know what we're doing a little bit. And
doesn't the word lectionary just mean schedule?
Is that what it is?
I think like it's just a schedule of
that makes
reading.
Sense. Yeah. So what you wanted to speak to, because part of what Ben explained is part of what makes it confusing is even within the 2019 ACNA lectionary, which is located in the back of the Book of Common Prayer, there's actually 2 lectionaries.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that?
So, sure. we typed this up in an effort to make this more clear. So, there's the daily office lectionary, that's like your readings that are outside of Sunday. So like what I use in the app, or what's going to pop up if you pull up that app or the podcast, that's the daily office lectionary. And then for the readings on Sunday that you'll see if you come to Grand Street for a service, that's out of what's called the Sunday Holy Day and Commemoration lectionary. And they just describe that as for the public reading of Scripture in the liturgies of the church. So I think where we were like so hung up is that we were like in the app, you can go to Sunday.
Oh, you can? I didn't even know that.
But it's a different reading than would be in the Eucharistic. Yeah, in the Holy Day one. And I think that's where we were like, what is this? So yeah, it's 2 different lectionaries. Makes sense to me now.
Yep. So one is the one that you would use in a public worship service. The other is what you would use more or less in a private.
Right.
Even though, there's a place for the daily office happening together.
Right.
And then there's also, so within the app, there's like cycles. Like the daily office can be 1 year or 2 years.
Yep.
And then what's the Sunday, Holy Days, and Commemoration Day cycle?
That one's 3 years.
Okay.
From what we are finding on the internet.
And you don't read everything, but the vast majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something like you read through the New Testament and then parts of the Old Testament. Okay. I think is what it is. And then the Psalter, or all the Psalms, you can pick a 30-day cycle or a 60-day cycle, which I think that's really cool. You can get through all 150 Psalms in 30 days if you want, which means you read more per day.
Part of what I learned that was fun is in the 2019 prayer book, the Psalter, the translation that it uses is, as I understand it, it's an amalgamation of writing done by T.S. Eliot and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, you told me that, and I had no idea, and that makes me love it even more, because it's like beautiful in the Book of Common Prayer. It's written like the formatting is just beautiful.
Because when you do the other readings, you can click multiple different versions. But within the Psalter, do you choose versions, or is it just default to that? Do you know?
It gives you contemporary, and then I don't know what they call the other one.
Okay, and the contemporary is probably the T.S. Eliot,
probably
C.S. Lewis one.
Yeah. That's part of what I love about the app is they give you, like, just right on your phone or whatever you're using, they write out all of the, all the scripture. So you're scrolling. But if you have the Book of Common Prayer, you can read them out of that too. So
right.
I prefer to do that because it's just right there and it's pretty.
And I'm reminded, even as we're sitting here, like, I'm not teaching Sunday, but there are several people who've already become accustomed to, like, we put it on the mind map every week. So I got to go work on that. Yeah, we put the readings, and now they'll actually be accurate, because that's part of where we had bought a stack too that we were excited to sell, and we're like, oh no, I think this was the Church of England's, which is different.
Right. Yeah.
So, which again, none of that's the end of the world, but
it's just like if you want to be on the same schedule as everyone else who's using that lectionary, then you do have to have the right one.
Yeah, and what was Ben's line where he's like, there's a lot of similarity between all of them, but there are distinctions. Like I mean, let's take Advent, for example. What I've found is when I've chose to go to a Mass on a Saturday night just to kind of hear someone else teach that text, it's almost always been, I think it always has been the same, which makes me wonder, maybe that's because they use the Revised Common Lectionary. Now that I'm saying that out loud, I don't know. But that Ben said that over and over again, like, they're all very similar, and yet they all have these really weird distinctions. And if you do choose to access it through the back of the BCP, it gets it's kind of its own language to figure out what you're reading today.
Yep.
So the app is a great tool that way.
Yeah, it is.
The mind map.
Really, really easy. Mind map, the app, or the podcast with Andrew Russell. Yeah.
All those are good tools. Anything else you would add about this? I feel like we covered it, which was kind of the point. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, it's really not that hard.
It's a steep learning curve, but once you that's kind of what it is.
Once you have like the map of what it is, then it's really not confusing. It's just and so maybe it won't be confusing if you're starting out, and you don't know about the lectionary and you want to try it. Since we have it laid out for you, maybe it won't be as confusing, so you didn't have to do this
that's true. Maybe so.
Go all around and find different versions. So you don't use the lectionary in your morning time.
Well, because mine is hybrid, so I do use the daily office lectionary for the Psalms. So I'm on the 60-day cycle of the Psalms, and for probably 2 years before that, I just read the Psalms chronologically, and then switched somewhere around a year ago to this. But then. So technically then I am reading the lectionary, but my pattern, then I'm switching over to the gospel reading. Like this morning, actually I'm behind on this one. This morning I was reading what is the lectionary for Good Friday. But not the daily office lectionary, but the Sunday, because that's just, what I've talked ad nauseum about it on Sundays of, I like to be in the text several months in advance.
Sure.
So I'm not in the daily office one, but I am in the lectionary probably, 75% of my mornings.
Sure.
Which has been and I'm kind of in this space of, like, right now, I haven't even done a full cycle of just Gospels. So I generally because I usually will spend a week in whatever that Sunday gospel reading is, but the first day I usually read all of the readings, which is for Sundays is always an Old Testament, always a New Testament, always a Psalm, and always a Gospel. Most of the time I then just stick with the Gospel. But I'm looking forward. I can see a few years from now when not that you'd ever grow tired of the Gospels. Like, I have friends who they'll look ahead and they'll go, hey, for these next 8 weeks, the reading is from Romans. So we're actually going to make the teaching point Romans for these 8 weeks. I can see those days coming, but haven't felt the need to do that yet.
Well, and like to play devil's advocate, right? Like it's not really about what schedule you use. It's more like you can use this lectionary that we're talking about. You can make up your own like you're doing. So I would say the important part is just being in the text. What do you think doing that for you daily gives you?
Oh, I mean, I've always made this joke of like, I love a Jesus who just wants me to have personal reflections. And so at the risk of coming across as arrogant, I mean, when I was introduced to this idea of a quiet time at 19 years old, I mean, at the time I worked for Coca-Cola, and so I was at work at 6 a.m. So I'd come home from work and spend a couple hours before I was able to switch that to a morning routine. That's always, frankly, like that's probably my favorite part of being a Christian. I love that time. So much of our like scattering initiative is born of my own shadow, which is I love a Jesus who just wants me to have fanciful thoughts. But from a lectionary standpoint, what I've found to be really rescuing in the last 5 years is the decision fatigue piece and I don't get to miss stuff that makes me squirm.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that, the point stands when you say, like, I don't remember how you said that earlier, but it's just an option is for so that would mean that for the first 15 years of my Christian life, really more like almost 20 plus years of my Christian life, I was kind of on this choose your own adventure Bible pathway, and having not been raised in the Bible, like I think that's fine because almost everything I was reading was new for a long time. Right. So it remakes that point of, to me, arguing about how a person decides what they're going to read that morning is akin to like arguing about what version, like
right.
We should be able to count our wins a little bit better than that.
Right. Absolutely.
But more succinctly to the answer to your question of like, I'm not who I am without that habit. And even as a parent, like I'm like a C- in so many areas, but I'm so thankful that one of my kids' lasting memories, or good ones, will be each in our own way. Like they'll always have a memory of like Teresa and I in the morning get up and do the quiet time thing. She has a very different routine than I am, but I think it's just such a identity centering practice.
Right. And a model, like, you modeled that for them so that they might go out and do that too.
Yeah. Should life become overwhelming at some point, I'm hoping it just models the like, get grounded in that way. I can't imagine, in the same way I can't imagine someone who, like, what it would feel like to not drink a healthy amount of water every day. Like, I can't imagine trying to do the things we do without that time.
And I think it opens up, the opportunity for God to move. Like, if you have a schedule and a routine, like maybe you use the lectionary or you're going to start, you can do both. Like, you can read that, you can stay in that schedule, but then say something catches your eye and you want to go on this like tangent of, I'm going to read all the Gospels, I'm going to read, whatever, I'm going to deep dive into Psalm 23 or, whatever. It's like, it reminds me of our office culture. Like in our hour of reading, you read the point is you read, something for an hour, but if in that hour you're like, holy cow, this idea struck me, I'm going to go work on that. I think that's really beautiful. It doesn't have to be so like legalistic. Yep.
Yeah. Count the wins. It's not I love that. How long have you had that routine? I mean,
oh man, yeah, long time. Since before I moved back to Montana. Yeah, definitely an integrated part of my. And if I don't, or if it's a weird morning, or I, run out of time, whatever, it's like the whole day is wrong. Like the whole day feels bad. It's just like you're spinning around like a chicken with your head cut off, and.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is a good practice to go like, okay, figure out life without your routine.
Right.
But
I don't like that. So.
Yeah. I think as a pastor, that's going to serve, this is my bias, but that's going to serve you so well because first of all, a lot of clergy they do their Bible study at work, and I think that's fine. It's why when people ask me how many hours I work, I've always struggled to answer that question, because I'm like, well, many of the people that I learned would count their personal quiet times among that.
Oh, sure.
And I'm a couple hours deep at that point, or at least an hour.
Yeah.
But also, like, I can, in moments of unrest and uncertainty, I can so clearly look in the mirror and know that I don't read the Bible because I work for a church. I work for a church because I fell in love with God and the text and the spiritual practices. And so to know that that was in place for you before you were working here, I just have no doubt that that'll be such an anchoring reality for you.
Sure. Yeah.
And however life leads you through.
And that's, a practice like that that's what it feels like, is an anchor. In like, you can move, you can change jobs, you can whatever, stress and sorrow and joy and whatever, but that doesn't change, it's very grounding.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say this from the stage often, but we have a staff that's very faithful in this space, and I love that. And B, I think I speak for all of us when I say, like, there's not a more exciting meeting to have than to sit across from someone that's like, okay, so I think I want to establish like a morning quiet time routine. Can you help me? So kind of throw that out there, and almost no one ever asks for that meeting, and that's okay. But myself, Leslie, Hannah, Lexi, Gay, they all have really, really strong routines. I can't speak to the staff that's not housed here because I don't know quite as much of their routines. But anyway, so reach out.
Yeah. Yep.
What else?
I can't think of anything.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for entertaining all of this, and hopefully that provides some insight. Also, if you want to see that half-page thing, you can email any one of us and we can share that with you.
If you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org.
You can also look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for listening.